Well, thank you. It certainly is a great delight to be with you all tonight. I've entitled our talk, Better Biology, the Keys for Navigating Life in the Marketplace. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to try to take us on a journey that took me nearly 10 years to traverse. Our destination is a better way of living economic life. On this journey, we're going to begin with some good news, but we're going to find embedded within this good news, there's actually some bad news. But be encouraged. We're going to conclude with some hopeful news. Our marker for success tonight is going to be if each and every one of us decides to change at least one economic behavior going forward. Let's begin with the good news. Over the last century, Americans have enjoyed a remarkable period of economic growth. In fact, our standard of living has increased eightfold since 1900. We live 8 times better in economic terms than people born in 1900. I'd like to introduce you to my maternal grandmother, John Dallas Herr. She lived every single decade of the 20th century and experienced firsthand this tremendous economic growth. I remember talking to Grandma and listening to her regale us with stories of growing up in a large family in rural Tennessee. There was singing, there was dancing the Virginia Reel on Saturday nights. They pulled back the kitchen table and the whole family danced up and down. Stories of horse rides, buggy rides, plantings, harvests. It really sounded so grand. I asked her one day, Grandma, sounds so good. Wouldn't you like to go back to those good old days? She looked up at the ceiling for a while and was thinking about those old days, and then she gave back to the present. No, child, I would not go back. Every 10 years, the Census Bureau does a deep dive on how we live as Americans and how we spend our money. The last time they did that was in 2012, but they also did it in 1900. This gives us an opportunity to get a bit of insight on how the world has changed over that century. In the world my grandmother was born into, people seldom live long. Our life expectancy today is nearly twice as long. People worked long and hard in 1900. 60-hour work weeks were the norm. We still work hard, but not nearly as long. Just preparing meals was a full-time job. We spend much less time at that task today. Food consumed the major share of the household budget in 1900. We might feel like food is expensive today, but the reality is that it was much costlier for families at the turn of the century. Now we do spend more on our housing, but look at the difference in housing. Houses today are much larger, and we enjoy many more amenities than we did back then. What we spend on clothing is just a fourth of what families spent on clothing at the turn of the century. So in terms of the basic necessities of life, food, clothing, and housing, families then were spending a full 2/3 of their income on the basic necessities, while today we spend just a little over a third. This, of course, leaves a lot more disposable income for things like hobbies, entertainment, travel, healthcare, education. Speaking of education, only half of the children of my grandmother's childhood would have been in school. Today, it's really the norm. And the children in our schools today are there for nearly twice as long as they were. College would have been a rare occurrence in 1900. Today, it's much more common, though far from being a universal experience. Life at the turn of the 20th century would not see much by way of running water, modern plumbing, and virtually none of the wonderful amenities that you and I enjoy each and every day today. No, life was much harder then, and when she thought about it, Grandma had little desire to return to those days. My job as an economist is to ask what's fueled this economic growth. The answer is we can attribute it to the power of market-based economies. So how do markets work? When we say markets, what we're really talking about is simply the collective choices of billions of people around the world, each making the best choices they can to further their own self-interest, to increase their own welfare. And in doing so, this invisible hand of the market guides our choices in ways that improve not only the welfare of ourselves, but others as well. Free, fair, voluntary exchange leaves both parties to the exchange better off than they were prior to the trade. But implicit in every transaction is that each party to the exchange is making a personal valuation of the worth of the items being exchanged. Are you buying a car? You must ask yourself, what's it worth? In the market for a boat? Again, you have to judge, what's it worth? In the market for a painting? Same question. Can't decide for yourself? Just take it to the Antiques Roadshow, and they'll offer their opinion as to what it's worth. But all this brings us to the bad news. You know, markets are mostly about things. Things get bought and sold each day. Some of those exchanges we'd find quite acceptable. Others would appall us. But markets in and of themselves don't really care, nor do they have the capacity to care. Markets can't distinguish between the merits of carrots or cocaine, housing or heroin, jewels or junk food. Markets just bring us what we want. You know, I got into this teaching business flush with the fever of the merits of the marketplace. Oh, I was so impressed with the power of market economies to raise standards of living. But then I came to realize that I was offering my students this delectable piece of fruit. But there was something at the core that was utterly distasteful. Markets are undergirded by a worldview that's egocentric, humanistic, and relativistic. As a follower of Christ, I'm committed to a worldview that is Christocentric, others-oriented, and believes in ultimate truths that transcend personal human calculus. Christians put God at the center of everything. Markets put you and me at the center of everything. Just look at the brochures we have around campus to let our students about where they can go shopping. Baraboo, we've saved the best for you. Gurney Mills, it's all about you. Head up to Woodfield. Woodfield, everyone gets their own. So what's the problem with a relativistic worldview? Which of those lines is longer? B looks longer than A, but the truth of the matter is they're the same length. Which of those orange dots is larger? One appears to be larger, but what's the truth? They're exactly the same size. Which of those lines are parallel? Given the relative position of one line to the other, we'd say none of them appear to be parallel. But the truth of the matter is every one of those lines is parallel. A relativistic worldview cannot be depended upon to lead us to absolute truths. Is there a way forward? Here's some hopeful news. The great strength of markets is that it does an amazing job of reflecting our values. If you value chocolate, markets will get you chocolate. If you value strawberries, in time, market's going to figure, oh, you want strawberry? I'll get you strawberry. So if markets do such a great job of reflecting our values, then it's incumbent upon us to bring the right values to the marketplace. What values? I offer a list of 12. They come from a lifelong study of the Bible and from my years of studying history of economic thought, particularly as it relates to this notion of value. They represent the intersection of biblical thought and economic thought. As I talk about some of these values, I want you to think about what bad economic outcomes you are aware of that might have been avoided had these values been adhered to. I'll talk about a handful of them. People are more important than things. How many of you believe that? Anybody believe that? Great. How many of you believe that I believe that? Good. I believe it. So we were riding our bikes as a family. Me, my children, my wife at the back, baby on the back of the bicycle. Headed over to Grandma's house, Grandma and Grandpa's. They lived right across from a park in town. It was a Sunday afternoon, beautiful day. I was leading the troops. We got right within eyeshot of Grandma and Grandpa's house, right across in the corner of the park, when I heard the distinctive sound of metal on metal and breaking glass. The child right behind me had been watching my excellent leadership, but had been distracted by the children playing in the park, and as a result, didn't see the car that was parked along the side of the road. I went around the car. This child went into the back of the car. Hence, broken glass, metal on metal. Did I mention it was a brand new car? Yeah, still had the license applied for sticker on it. Did I mention it was a brand new Porsche? Yep. Child ran right back in the right. So, now the owner of the Porsche had been in the park, had witnessed the whole thing. He'd been swinging his little girl on a swing. It came running over, got right into my face. The first words out of his mouth was, "Is your son okay?" Isn't that beautiful? All right. I got to tell you the rest of the story. I didn't know. I'd been too busy inspecting the damage to the Porsche that I knew I was going to have to pay for. Oh, yeah. Now, I'm not proud of that story. But if you'd asked me 5 minutes before, what's more important, people or things, I would have said, bring a stack of Bibles. Give me a stack of Bibles that high. I'll swear on a stack of Bibles that I believe people are more important than things. And if you ask me what's more important, your child or a thing, I would have told you, my child, no question. So I have a little to-do list each and every day of how to live life and how to particularly live economic life. You know what's at the top? Remember, people are more important than things, because I know in the heat of the economic moment, people forget. Even people that believe that people are more important things forget. Leave everything a little better than you found it. The country was Honduras. It was early evening. The sun was setting. We'd been out in the fields of this finca on a farm with a student. Todd was his name. He was there as a hunger student. I was there visiting him. And we've been walking across, just getting a look at what was going on. He was there helping young orphan boys learn a living. And so that's why we were on a farm. So we were walking across the countryside, and there was a little path, and there was some trash over there. He wandered down, picked up that trash, put it in his pocket, got back, trash bin by the rest of the farmhouses, and he put it in a basket there. And I said, Todd, did you clean up the whole farm? What's going on? He said, well, you know, Honduras has experienced a lot of economic growth. And with that economic growth, there's just a lot more trash and garbage and stuff lying around. And I'd been to Honduras 10 years earlier, and you know, he was right. It was absolutely true. I'd noticed the same thing. There was just a lot more junk with the economic development. And that was the seed of a thought. I said, well, that's got to be number 2 on my list. Leave everything a little better than you find it. So to remind me of that, I've incorporated some habits. So every time I walk across campus, I try to pick up one piece of trash in honor of Todd. Now, I don't take responsibility for cleaning up the whole campus. All I have to do is leave it a little better than I find it. If I use a public restroom anywhere, I don't clean the whole restroom, but I always take a towel and I wipe down the sink right in front of there. I just have to leave it a little better than I found it. If every human being in economic life approached that life with that value, would the world look any different? It would. How would we leave our customers? Better than we find them. How would we leave our suppliers? Better than we found them. How would we leave our employees? Better than we find them. How would we leave the environment? Better than we find it. Leave everything a little better than you find it. Treat people like you want to be treated. Hear that before? 1902, a young man, 28 years old, drew a line in the sand and said, this is how we will run our business. His name was James Cash Penney. How many businesses can you name that were started in 1902 that are still here today? The Golden Rule is the foundation on which the company J.C. Penney was built, and it was built to last. Couple Golden Rule illustrations. Traveling with students in Europe, we've been in London, we were down in Amsterdam, we checked into our hotel. I shouldn't tell you the name of the hotel, but ask me afterwards and I'll tell you gladly. And gave our credit card because we had a bunch of rooms for all these students to pay for. Clerk at the desk took that card, said, there's a problem with the card. Oh, what's that? So the bank says there's a problem with the card. So we call the bank. He said, don't worry about it. Hang on. We'll call the bank. Call the bank. And the bank said, oh, 2 days ago, you were using that card in London. Now it showed up in Amsterdam. We thought it was a hot card. So we told the clerk they should check the ID of the presenter. So I went back down, explained the whole thing, talked to people in New York, got it all square. We headed off to dinner. Came back after dinner, just checking with her, everything okay? He says, not really. I said, what's the problem? He handed the card in 2 parts. He'd cut it in 2. And we're in Europe with 30 students, with another 2 weeks, and no credit card. How are you going to do this? Why did he do this? I know exactly why he did this. I used to audit credit cards when I worked in the banking industry. There's this thing called hot card list. And whenever there's a suspect card, you get a hot card list, you notify retailers, and anytime a retailer recovers a hot card, they get a bounty, and a substantial bounty. That clerk understood it. He knew that card was as good as gold, but he said, if I cut it up, I'll get my bounty because that's what the code said. It was hot. Had he been in my shoes traveling Europe with 30 students, do you think he would want that credit card cut up? Another sort of golden rule opportunity. Think of the people that serve us each and every day. The next time you're waiting in line at the grocery store, just observe how people generally treat the good folks that serve us by checking out our food and putting it in bags. Oftentimes, they're treated as if they're barely human. Yet they have names, families, dreams, hopes, hurts, just like you and I do. They have name tags. I try to call these people by name. I try to ask them about their day. And I try to thank them for their service, particularly if it's on a weekend or at some odd hour of the day. Why do I do that? Well, if I was on their side, I think I would appreciate somebody recognizing my humanity and my desire to serve them. Treat other people like you want to be treated. Live for something good that's greater than yourself. People are born with this longing. Ultimately, a life lived for God is the only thing that will truly fulfill this desire. But in the absence of that, a vacuum is created, and it's going to be filled one way or the other. This desire is widely recognized in economic life around us. Biz Stone, founder of Twitter, sees it. When it comes to keeping people motivated, he says, and engaged, I think the key is offering a kind of meaningfulness to the work that's above and beyond the product itself. In other words, the company and its product have to be on a trajectory to make a positive impact in the world. Steve Jobs was aware of it. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water? Or do you want a chance to change the world? Other notable people that understood this innate desire to live for some great cause: Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler. They understood our desire to live for a cause larger than ourselves. In the absence of greater cause, the default is there's no greater cause than living for ourselves. If that becomes the economic norm, we will not always be pleased with economic outcomes. Young people I talk to today are not just interested in making a dollar, they want to make a difference. Dr. Howard, talk to me about making a difference, not just about how to make a dollar. One troubling outcome in economic life today is that for many people, work is not working all that well. There's little meaning, little sense of purpose or fulfillment in their work. Somehow, we've lost our sense of vocation. Now, work has always been part of God's plan for people created in His image. Work was designed to be a good thing. Now, it looks a little different in a fallen world, but still work is an integral dimension of human flourishing. Vocation is about being. Career is about doing. Now, thinking about career is important, but it should be secondary to thinking about vocation. Vocation begins with a vision of who it is we want to become as men and women of God. That vision then drives our careers. Our work will go on to shape us in terms of that vision. That's why it's absolutely critical to think about vocation first and let that drive our choices about work. Young people that I talk to have very little sense of direction when it comes to career. That's because their level of self-awareness is still pretty limited. They're also not very aware of the range of opportunities of work that they can be doing outside of the college experience. Even so, I'm firmly convinced that young people can form a clear vision of vocation in terms of who it is they want to become as a person of God. The Bible is replete with examples of such young people. Daniel, Joseph, Esther, Deborah, David, all come to mind. But we should do all that we can to move towards flourishing in our work. The most common conversation I have in the course of a year is what I call my green, yellow, red speech. I carve life into greens, yellows, and reds. Greens are those areas of gift and passion. Yellow, you might have the gift, but not the passion. You might have the passion, but not the gift. Red, no gift, no passion. Now, somebody who's very conscientious can actually be quite effective working in their yellows. It's just that by 5 o'clock, no gas in the tank. You go home, you watch TV, you just veg, no energy. Reds, you can actually be effective in your reds, but you're burning gas so fast, by noon, you're running on empty. Young people that I work with are quite aware of what's yellow and red for them. But when it comes to discerning green, they really seem to struggle. I've concluded that for most people in the United States, high school today is largely an orange experience. They go from bell to bell, class to class, very uneven in terms of the quality of the experience, and virtually no mapping of how it's all put together. One of the most important things we can do for our students is to help them begin identifying what's green for you. But that's another Tower Talk for another time. Our point tonight is the key to flourishing in our vocation is to begin with a vision that includes a healthy dose of self-awareness. Well, our time is gone. We've really only scratched the surface. If we're passive in our economic living, then we have no right to complain about market outcomes that are less than God-honoring. My encouragement to all of us is that we become much more intentional in our economic choices. And that brings us to our marker of success for the evening. What one thing will you do differently going forward in terms of your economic choices? When we bring God-honoring values to the marketplace, then the market will increasingly reflect God-honoring outcomes. God will be glorified, and people will be well served. Thanks for listening to our Tower Talk.